This year we've been on a journey here at First Christian Church in Gurnee. It's been a journey to a better year in 2011 than we had in 2010. It's a journey that has focused more on what God has done and on what God is doing than on what we have done and what we are doing. Question. How many here still would like the year 2011 to be better than 2010? Raise your hand. Oh, good. Raise your hand if you think that so far, that through April 24th, 2011, that 2011 has been a better year than 2010. Now, those of you who have your hands up, keep your hands up. I want the rest of you to look around. And I would encourage you to ask the question, especially if your hand is not up, how and why are those with their hands up having a better year? I think you can put your hands down. I think you might want to ask them. Because many of those who have had their hands up have had a better year on purpose. They've had a better year because they made decisions at the beginning of the year to participate and to do things that will help them have a better year. Quite frankly, I want you to think about your friends and neighbors and ask yourself if your friends and neighbors really are concerned about your year being better than last year. If your friends and neighbors are like my friends and neighbors, and I'm going to tell you that most of your friends and neighbors are just like my friends and neighbors, we probably have some of the same friends and neighbors. They're more concerned about their year than they are about your year. And so if we're going to have a better year, we have to be the ones to decide we're going to have a better year, and we are the ones who are going to have to take the steps necessary, the actions necessary for having a better year. Now I have another question for you. How many today, and this is another raise your hand one, know the reason you're here today? Any of you know why you're here today? Those of you who don't know why you're here, we may need to talk. But we don't have time. Now here's what I know. Is that I know the reason you're here today. Now, look around the room. Go ahead, look at the people sitting next to you, behind you, and in front of you. Now here's either some good news or some bad news. Most of the people you see probably aren't here for exactly the same reason you're here. See if some of these reasons are familiar to you, and don't raise your hand unless you feel really compelled to do so. Because, I don't want you to feel badly when you raise your hand with some of these reasons. Some of you, I know, are here today because it's Easter Sunday, and that's what you do on Easter. You go to church. Some of you are here because of your mother, living or dead. Some of you are here for some other sentimental reason. Maybe you were driving down and it was Easter Sunday, you heard the announcer on the radio, and you passed the church and you say, hey, it's Easter Sunday. I heard that crash, but some of you are here because you love the music or the flowers or the pageantry, or you have family members or loved ones who are involved. Some of you are here because you love the church, the people, the music, the worship. Some of you are here, I think, secretly hoping for a word of hope, for a change in your life, for a new start. And finally, I believe that there are some who are here today because their hope has been fulfilled. They have found a change in their lives. They've received a new start, and they're here to celebrate. And no matter the reason you're here today, I want to thank you for being here, because each and every one of you had the choice. The choice to be here or not. Go ahead, look around the room. You're here. It's true. Look, you're here. Right? There you are. And now I have some good news for you. Here's a promise. The promise is this: you will get at least what you have expected from worship this morning. You will. Now, some of you came to worship without any expectations at all, and I have a promise for you. You might get exactly what you expected. Some of you have come with a great hope, and I have good news for you. It's highly possible, even probable, that because you came looking for a hope, you will leave with that hope. So I want you to turn to a neighbor. I want you to tell them this: I'm glad that's settled. I'm glad that's settled. Now I have one more question for you. And this is a hands-up question. How many of you here today would like to get more out of Easter this year? How many of you would like the resurrection to really be something you celebrate instead of something you actually just tolerate? Would any of you like it if I could give you 3 really good reasons to really celebrate Jesus' resurrection today?
Yes.
I'm going to give you 3. I'm going to give you 3 really good reasons to celebrate. 3 reasons that you can go home and say, I'm really glad that I went to worship today. I'm really glad that I saw so-and-so. I'm really glad that I experienced the resurrection at First Christian Church because of the promises. Because of the promises we've heard in the 2 scripture readings this morning. Because of the way our lives can be, may be, changed. Reason number 1. There are only 3 reasons, but you may want to write these down. Because I know how I am. If I don't write number 1 down, by the time I get to number 3, I've forgotten number 1. It's really embarrassing. Especially when you're the preacher. The first reason to really celebrate today is because Jesus' resurrection means that we are forgiven for the things in our past. Turn to a neighbor and say, we're forgiven. Now some of you went, I don't even need forgiveness. What's that? Well, you know, I've been doing a little research, and I've discovered something. Every single one of us needs some forgiveness. Turn to a neighbor and tell them, you need some forgiveness. Go ahead and tell you, no. Return the favor. But you know, it is kind of like the pot calling the kettle. How many times a day do you think you sin? Thank you. I knew that would get you. And here goes the preacher on Easter Sunday. He's going to talk about sin. How many times do you neglect something you know that you should do? How many times do you think of something to do because of a selfish motive? Or think a lustful thought or an angry thought? How many times a day? 10? 15? 20? Well, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to say that all of you are like saints and you only sin 3 times a day. Any of you all for that? Raise your hand. Yeah. You see, here's the deal. That sounds really good, doesn't it? Turn to a neighbor and say, hey, if you only sin 3 times a day, that's good. It's good, right? Well, think about this with me. If you only sin 3 times a day, and maybe it's a bad thought, a neglected deed, or some word you shouldn't have said. 3 times a day sounds pretty good, but this is where I need the mathematical geniuses. But if I did my math right, if you only sin 3 times a day, that sounds good until you figure out that there are 365 days in a year. And if you only sin 3 times a day, you multiply that by 365, it comes out to 1,095 sins a year. And Teresa gave me the thumbs up. I know. Now, even that doesn't sound too bad until you realize that you're probably going to live to be 70. And by the time you're 70, if you only sin 3 times a day, you will have collected 76,550 sins against you. Any of you worried yet? And to be honest, every person here today knows that the 3 sins a day thing is a little low. Don't you think? It's a little low. And Scripture tells us that even if we only sin once, one time, we're guilty. We're done. We're done. So the real question here today is anyone here guilty of committing even one single sin? You see, that's why Jesus comes. That's the first reason. Jesus comes to wipe out that sin. Jesus comes to take his right-on wipe-off marker and wipe off the sin right out of your life. That's right. You know, some of you need to be more like this little boy. I really kind of expected someone to say, at least, all right. I mean, some of you were raising your hand saying, 3's not enough, 3's not enough, I need more. And Jesus said, it doesn't matter. Jesus says, it doesn't matter how many times you sin, because his death on the cross, his resurrection from the grave, takes out that great big eraser and does this. Whoosh! And it's wiped out. There's no more sin. Jeremiah 31:34 says it this way, and I will forgive their wickedness and will never again remember their sin. That's good news. That's good news because I'm one of those ones that has at least 3 sins a day. I was reminded really of a story from Juan Ortiz, who tells the story about a father and son in Spain. They'd gone their separate ways, they yelled at each other, they had screamed obscenities at each other. They went like this. And the father realized what had happened. He began to look for his son, and he began to look for his son, and he looked everywhere, went to every village, every town, looking for his son. He searched for months and months. Finally, in a desperate attempt to find him, he went to the newspaper in Madrid, and he ran an ad. The ad said, "Dear Paco, meet me in front of this newspaper office at noon on Saturday. All is forgiven. I love you." And he signed it, "Your father." On that Saturday, when that father went to the newspaper office, he found 800 young men named Paco, waiting to be forgiven, waiting to experience the grace of forgiveness, waiting to have a clean slate. And I wonder how many Pacos we have right here in this room today. All you have to do is admit your need, admit your sin, to come to God in repentance, and because of the cross, because of the empty tomb, all is forgiven. You're given a clean slate, just as if it had never happened. The resurrection, my friends, promises forgiveness. Now, reason number 2. Not only does resurrection bring us a promise of forgiveness from our past, but I will tell you that the resurrection, the empty tomb, brings us a purpose for the present. We often talk about how Christ can solve our problems. Any of you have any problems? Usually when we talk about problems, don't we talk about the big ones? See if you notice any of these things, like Christy losing her grandmother. It's a problem. It's a pain. It's a hurt. We know that. We sometimes talk about struggling with addictions or suffering from terminal cancer. But isn't it true that all of those big things like that somehow, sometimes, doesn't really resonate with you? Because you're not dying from cancer. Because your grandmother hasn't passed away. Because of whatever reason. And most of you in this room, I know well enough to know that you would say that, yes, those are big problems, but isn't it true that the little things oftentimes get more in the way? There are people here in this sanctuary, I'm going to tell you, that don't have any huge problems. It's true. Now, some of you have a computer that might get a virus once in a while, or your lawnmower may break down, or you may spill coffee on the carpet, but quite frankly, besides that, if I pressed you hard enough, you'd say, I don't really have too many problems. And yet, most of us deep down inside, if we're really honest, will go, I don't have any problems. Life is pretty good to me. But it sure seems empty. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know why I'm doing it. It's true. Most of the people in America today live life without purpose. We live life floating along, hoping that something will connect with us and we'll go, oh, this is us. This is what I want to do. I've been meeting with a group of college students on Thursday. It's Campus Crusade for Life at CLC. And one of the things that they've been talking about is God's purpose for our lives. And I remember the first time we started this Bible study, the looks of absolute wants me to do with my life. How many of us in this room know what God has called us to do? I will tell you that the resurrection tells us. The resurrection is a promise of purpose, and the purpose is always to celebrate the resurrection. Now, what does that mean? Does it mean that you're going to do the same thing that the person next to you does? Of course not. But it does mean that God has called us to use our gifts and talents in ways that will change people's lives, that will bring people into relationship with Him, that will change our world. You see, most of us when we have that deep sense of emptiness inside, begin to try to fill it up. We just put stuff in. We put stuff in. We put activities in. We put information in. We put more activities in. In America, activities are big at filling emptiness, let me tell you. We stuff it full, and we stuff it full, and we stuff it full. And then we take our foot and we stuff it in some more because, quite frankly, it doesn't seem to matter how much stuff we put into our lives, how many toys we collect, how many vacations we take, how many anything that we put in. Our life gets busy and our life gets full, but the emptiness doesn't go away. I love the story of the resurrection from the Gospel of John. It says, when Mary came back and told the disciples that the tomb was empty, that Peter and John ran to the tomb. And John outran Peter. But he waited for Peter to go in first. I always thought that was interesting. But it was what happened after they left that shows us the purpose. They did what Jesus told them to do. They went to Galilee, and there they experienced Him some more, and they learned some more, and they began to do what He said. They found their purpose in the resurrection, and you and I can do that too. This resurrection gives us purpose for living today. So through the Easter message, we find forgiveness of the past and purpose for the present. But also when we look at that empty tomb, there's one more thing that we're promised. We're given a hope for tomorrow. Turn to a neighbor and tell them, hope for tomorrow. You see, I have some good news or bad news for you. You're going to die. It's true, I've done the research. 100% of us are going to die. You can look it up. It's in every encyclopedia. Every person that ever lived died. Now, that doesn't seem like a very nice thing to say on Easter Sunday, does it? Well, it's part of the truth. You see, we all want forgiveness from our past, don't we? And we all want a purpose for living today. Most of us would like to not think about the idea that we're going to die. And that's because most of us don't understand the hope that comes with it. When it comes to Easter, we hear the wonderful words we start the service with. He is not here, He is risen. And what that tells us is this. Because of the empty tomb, we know that this life is not all there is. We know that there's something that lies beyond death's door. And it's no longer really even a mystery. Because Jesus Christ defeated death, and because of our belief in Him, opened the door to life for every one of us. And because He lives, we can live too. So Jesus is risen from the dead. He lived for us. He died for us. He was buried for us. He was sealed in that tomb for us. And then 3 days later, He rose from the dead for us. In His resurrection, Jesus brought us three things, brought us three promises. He brought us forgiveness, purpose, and hope. You ever wonder why? Why? Why would God do that for us? There's only one reason. He does that for us because He loves us. Because He loves you. Because He loves you so much, He's willing even to die for you. That's why we can truly celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. Because of His love, we are forgiven, given purpose, and brought to hope. So let's celebrate.